Welcome to Chronicles of the Past, where we tell you about the present and the past of the living and late legend. Here is a great leader that Africa has missed, Nelson Mandela. July 18, 1918. In the small village of Mvezo in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, a boy was born who would grow up to carry the dreams of a nation. His name was Rolihlahla Mandela. In the Xhosa language, Rolihlahla means pulling the branch of a tree, a euphemism for troublemaker. And as history would reveal, he would live up to that name in the most extraordinary way. Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mafakanyiswa, was a respected advisor to the Thembu royal family. But when he lost his position due to a dispute with a colonial magistrate, the family moved to the village of Qunu. It was here that young Rolihlahla would spend his formative years, herding cattle, listening to elder stories by the fire, and soaking in the values of Ubuntu, the deep belief in community, respect, and shared humanity. His father passed away when he was only 9 years old, and that loss would change the course of his life forever. Taken in by Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, the acting regent of the Thembu people, Mandela moved to the royal palace in Mqhekezweni. There he was raised not just as a boy, but as a future leader. Surrounded by tribal councils and royal etiquette, Mandela watched and learned. He saw how disputes were resolved through discussion, not domination. These lessons would shape the man he would become. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Quote by Nelson Mandela. By the age of 16, Rolihlahla Mandela was ready to take the next step in his journey. His guardian, Chief Jongintaba, arranged for him to attend Clarkebury Boarding Institute, a prestigious school for black South Africans, far from his rural upbringing. It was here that he first wore shoes and lived among boys from across the Eastern Cape. Though he missed his home, Mandela began to see how education could empower him to shape a new future. He later enrolled at Healdtown, a strict Methodist college known for discipline and excellence. Surrounded by books, teachers, and structured learning, Mandela was shaped by British-style education, but he also began to see the contradictions between Christian teachings of equality and the realities of apartheid outside the school gates. At Healdtown, he encountered an idea that would ignite something deep inside him: African nationalism. The idea that Africans had their own history, dignity, and right to self-rule. It planted a seed that would grow slowly but defiantly in the years to come. In 1939, Mandela began studying at the University of Fort Hare, the only university for black students in southern Africa at the time. It was a place buzzing with political thought and dreams of liberation. Mandela studied law and arts, but it was the student council elections that sparked his first act of rebellion. He was elected to the Student Representative Council, but refused to accept the position due to undemocratic practices. The administration demanded he step down. When he didn't, he was suspended. It was his first political stand, and it cost him dearly. He was sent back home in disgrace. There, back in the royal household, Mandela faced an unexpected shock. Jongintaba had arranged a marriage for him. Feeling trapped, Mandela made a daring choice. He ran away from everything he knew. With nothing but a few belongings and an unshakable will, Nelson Mandela boarded a train to Johannesburg, a city pulsing with opportunity and danger. It was 1941, and he was just 23 years old. He had fled an arranged marriage and royal expectations to seek a life of his own design. But the Golden City did not welcome him with open arms. Mandela quickly learned the brutal truth of urban life under apartheid. Jobs were scarce, racism was law, and the world was split by skin color. His first jobs were menial, guarding mines, cleaning offices, but each challenge only sharpened his resolve. Fate led him to the home of Walter Sisulu, a real estate agent with deep political ties. Sisulu became both a mentor and a brother. It was here that Mandela encountered a new world of thinkers, revolutionaries, and freedom fighters. Through Sisulu, he met professionals, communists, and ANC activists. He saw black South Africans who were not bowed, but bold. Mandela soon found work as a clerk at a law firm run by Lazar Sidelski, one of the few white lawyers willing to train black clerks. Sidelski would prove to be a key influence, showing Mandela how law could be a tool for justice. By day he worked, By night, he studied through the University of South Africa, UNISA. He began to dream, not just of being a lawyer, but of helping his people in courtrooms that were never built for them. His ambition was not to rise alone, but to rise with others. This was also the time when Mandela joined the African National Congress, the ANC, and began to plant the seeds of political rebellion. What started as a quiet fire was about to roar. Johannesburg didn't just shape Mandela's future, it lit the fire of revolution within him. In 1944, surrounded by a circle of passionate young Africans like Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and Anton Lembede, Nelson Mandela co-founded the African National Congress Youth League. The goal was clear: to energize a new generation and shift the ANC from passive resistance to mass action. Mandela believed that freedom wouldn't be given, it had to be taken. He began organizing, writing, debating, marching. This was no longer about theory, this was about action. The Youth League called for boycotts, strikes, and civil disobedience to confront the racist laws that governed every corner of black life in South Africa. We believed that the old methods of petitioning and polite appeals were not working, quoted by Nelson Mandela. In the same year, Mandela married Evelyn Mace, a nurse and cousin of Walter Sisulu. The marriage brought moments of peace and growing responsibility. They would go on to have 4 children, though only 3 survived infancy. But Mandela's commitment to the struggle increasingly strained the marriage. He was consumed by politics, and his growing profile made their home a target of surveillance and stress. In 1952, Mandela helped lead the Defiance Campaign, the largest non-violent resistance movement South Africa had ever seen. Thousands deliberately broke apartheid laws, entering whites-only zones, refusing to carry passbooks, and peacefully accepting arrest. Archive footage, protesters chanting, being led away by police. Mandela traveled the country, giving fiery speeches. His reputation soared. He became the ANC's national volunteering chief. For the first time, apartheid had a real and organized opponent. But it came at a cost. Mandela was arrested, banned from public gatherings, and labeled a dangerous agitator. For the first time, he felt the cold bite of state repression. But there was no turning back. Cue rising orchestral swell as Mandela stands defiantly in court. "I have no other life but that of the struggle," he would later say. And that struggle was only just beginning. By the mid-1950s, Nelson Mandela had become one of the most recognizable leaders of the anti-apartheid movement. But leadership came at a steep price. His marriage to Evelyn Mace was crumbling. His life was under constant surveillance, and his every move was followed by the eyes of a paranoid regime. Mandela had become consumed by the movement. He missed birthdays, dinners, and milestones. Evelyn, a devout Jehovah's Witness, grew increasingly distant from his political path. In 1958, after years of emotional strain, the two divorced. During this period, Mandela partnered with Oliver Tambo to establish South Africa's first black law firm, Mandela Tambo Attorneys. In a country where few black South Africans had any legal recourse, the firm became a lifeline for many. But the government struck back. Mandela was banned from leaving Johannesburg, attending gatherings, or even speaking publicly. These banning orders tried to silence him, but Mandela continued to organize in secret. In December 1956, Mandela and 155 others were arrested and charged with high treason. Their crime? Calling for a multiracial democracy. The trial lasted 4 exhausting years. Mandela spent it preparing legal arguments, organizing defense teams, and building solidarity among the accused. Eventually, the charges were dropped, but the message was clear: the state would stop at nothing to crush resistance. March 21, 1960. Police opened fire on a crowd protesting the pass laws in Sharpeville, killing 69 unarmed people. Most were shot in the back. The horror shocked the world. Inside South Africa, the government declared a state of emergency and banned the ANC outright. The era of peaceful protest had hit a dead end. Mandela always says, "We had no choice but to continue the struggle by other means." This was the moment Mandela made the most controversial decision of his life. He went underground and began preparing for armed resistance. After the Sharpeville massacre, Mandela made a historic and dangerous choice. For decades, he had preached nonviolence. But now, faced with state terror, he came to believe that armed resistance was not only justified, it was necessary. In 1961, Mandela co-founded the armed wing of the African National Congress, called Umkhonto we Sizwe, or MK. Its mission, to sabotage government infrastructure and military targets, not to kill civilians, but to shake the foundations of apartheid. Mandela operated in secret. He became a master of disguise known as the Black Pimpernel. He traveled to Ethiopia, Algeria, and Ghana for guerrilla training and to rally support from African leaders. Nelson Mandela also quote, "It is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and nonviolence against a government whose only reply is savage attacks." On August 5, 1962, Mandela was captured near Howick while returning from a covert trip. He had been in hiding for over a year. He was charged not just with incitement, but with leaving the country illegally. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But his journey through the courts had just begun. While Mandela was serving his sentence, police raided a farmhouse in Rivonia and found documents linking him and others to MK's sabotage plans. He and 10 others were tried for acts of sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the state. "If found guilty," said the prosecutor, "they may face death." Then came the moment that changed history. Mandela stood in the dock and gave the most famous speech of his life. Mandela stand up saying, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court spared his life but took his freedom. Hold on. It's time for you to click on like and comment on our story and also subscribe to our channel so that anytime we post a video, you will be notified. Thank you. In 1964, Nelson Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a barren rock off the coast of Cape Town, prisoner 466-64. For the next 18 years, this would be his home. But even here, stripped of power, family, and freedom, Mandela became a symbol of defiance. He turned the prison into a university, the inmates into students, and his cell into a quiet command center for the revolution. But Mandela refused to be defeated. Instead of bitterness, he chose discipline. He woke early to exercise. He read constantly. He studied law and politics. Robben Island became what prisoners called the University of Mandela. Even the wardens began to respect him. Then Mandela started teaching the fellow inmates, scribbling notes on worn paper. He and his fellow ANC leaders transformed the prison into a training ground for future leadership. They debated policies, read banned books, and never let the dream of freedom die. But the cost was steep. Mandela's mother died. His eldest son, Thembu, was killed in a car crash. Mandela was not allowed to attend either funeral. He grieved alone, behind bars. His wife, Winnie Mandela, became a fierce activist in her own right. But she too was targeted, harassed, and imprisoned. Their visits were infrequent, monitored, and strained by time and trauma. Meanwhile, the world outside began to awaken. The global anti-apartheid movement gathered momentum. In London, Sydney, Lagos, and New York, the cry rang out, "Free Nelson Mandela!" His face appeared on posters, murals, and protest signs, even though many had never heard his voice or seen his image. People all over South Africa protesting, boycotts, global artists demanding Mandela's release. In 1976, the Soweto uprising showed the world that South Africa's youth would not accept oppression. Blood flowed in the streets, and Mandela's name became a banner of resistance. After 18 years on Robben Island, Mandela was transferred to Pollsmoor Prison in 1982. The apartheid regime, sensing pressure both at home and abroad, feared the icon they had locked away was only growing stronger. By the early 1980s, apartheid South Africa was showing signs of strain. Sanctions, uprisings, and growing international condemnation were shaking the regime. And behind prison walls, the man they tried to silence was now the symbol they couldn't ignore. In 1982, Nelson Mandela was moved from Robben Island to Pollsmoor Prison, a more modern facility in Cape Town. Though conditions were slightly improved, the purpose was strategic, to isolate him from the growing movement he inspired. But the regime underestimated him. Even in Pollsmoor, Mandela built bridges, not only with fellow inmates but with prison wardens and officials. He was now 64, his hair grey, but his presence formidable. In the mid-1980s, something extraordinary happened. The apartheid government under President P.W. Botha initiated secret talks with Mandela. They wanted to know, would he renounce violence? Would he help calm the unrest? Only free men can negotiate. Prisoners cannot enter into contracts. Quoted by Nelson Mandela. Mandela refused to betray the struggle, but he also knew peace would one day be necessary. He listened, he strategized, and he waited. Outside the prison walls, pressure on the regime was reaching a breaking point. Countries imposed economic sanctions. Artists like Stevie Wonder and U2 sang for Mandela. Colleges and cities boycotted companies that supported apartheid. Even the United Nations took a stand. Protests were made in London, concerts, UN declarations, and all of that. Inside South Africa, townships burned with rebellion. The youth of Soweto, the activists of UDF, and countless ordinary citizens kept the fire alive. In 1988, Mandela was moved once again, this time to a private house inside Victor Verster prison near Paarl. It was a softening gesture by a regime now on its knees. Mandela could now receive visits, including from foreign dignitaries. He was still a prisoner, but treated as a future president. The moment the world had waited for. After 27 years, on February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, holding hands with Winnie Mandela, to a crowd of thousands and a global audience of millions. The image stunned the world. The apartheid government had tried to break him, but he emerged strong, calm, and more determined than ever to build a democratic South Africa, not through vengeance, but through reconciliation. Nelson Mandela had walked out of prison a free man, but South Africa was far from free. The country was on the brink of civil war, torn between hope and hatred, between the past and the promise of something new. Mandela immediately went to work. As deputy president of the unbanned African National Congress, he began negotiating with President F.W. de Klerk and other leaders. These were not easy talks. They were tense, often violent times. Right-wing extremists launched attacks. Townships exploded in factional violence. But Mandela remained steady, a symbol of calm amidst chaos. Nelson Mandela. Quote again, "You do not make peace by talking to your friends, you make peace with your enemies." In 1993, Mandela and de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their roles in steering South Africa toward democracy. It was a moment of profound symbolism, the prisoner and the president shaking hands before the world, April 27, 1994. For the first time in history, black South Africans voted in democratic elections. The lines were miles long. The air was electric. For many, it was the first time they felt seen, heard, human. Elders weeping, youth singing, people holding up inked thumbs. When the votes were counted, the result was clear. Nelson Mandela would be the first black president of South Africa. In Pretoria, standing under the same flag that once symbolized oppression, Mandela raised his fist and spoke to a nation reborn. Here is the speech Nelson Mandela's made at his inauguration day. "Never, never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another." Now you can see world leaders, ordinary citizens and soldiers now under a united banner. As president, Mandela could have chosen vengeance. Instead, he chose healing. He invited his former jailers to lunch. He wore a Springboks rugby jersey to unite a divided nation. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where victims and perpetrators could speak, cry, and heal. Nelson Mandela served only one term as president, stepping down in 1999. A remarkable act in a continent where many leaders cling to power. But his impact did not end with politics. In many ways, it was just beginning. Mandela spent his later years promoting peace, justice, and education around the globe. He founded the Nelson Mandela Foundation and championed causes like HIV/AIDS awareness, poverty eradication, and children's rights. A humble leader, Mandela makes sure he finds time visiting schools, hugging children, speaking at global summits. He became a global elder, not just a former president, but a moral compass for a planet hungry for hope. World leaders sought his counsel. Celebrities visited him. Ordinary people traveled thousands of miles just to glimpse him. Another quote: "It is in the character of growth that we should learn from both pleasant and unpleasant experiences." As Mandela aged, his health slowly declined. He battled respiratory illness, a legacy of years spent breaking rocks on Robben Island. He withdrew from public life, spending more time with family and in reflection. Still, even in silence, his presence echoed louder than ever. On December 5, 2013, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela passed away peacefully at the age of 95. The world paused. From Soweto to Sydney, from Cairo to California, tributes poured in. People cried not just for his death, but for the depth of his life. Barack Obama was at Mandela's memorial. "He makes me want to be a better man." His state funeral was one of the largest in history. Presidents, kings, artists, and schoolchildren all came together to say farewell. But Mandela had always believed that no one man alone could carry a nation. Mandela once said, "I am not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying." And try he did, for justice, for peace, for dignity. His story is not a fairy tale. It is a testament to resilience. He lost decades, but never his faith. He was jailed, but never broken. He forgave when the world expected fury. He united when division seemed permanent. Today, the work continues. The struggle for equality is far from over. But if we carry even a fraction of his courage, his compassion, his clarity, we honor his legacy. Let's remember Mandela's final words to us. What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Got thoughts or questions? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.